see you too.
Hello.
Well, thank you for joining us today, and welcome back to the LFF. It seems just a year ago we were doing this gig right here. Jason, you've got a lovely association with the festival now. This question really just to open things up to you and Helen. You've a great knack in your production company, I think, of tapping into contemporary concerns, smoking and politics, teen pregnancy, the economic downturn. But there's possibly none bigger than our relationship with technology and with each other. And I wondered what it was about the original novel, Chad Culker's novel, that resonated with you. And was there also an immediate, cinematic potential to the novel? Did you see that from the get-go? Jason, would you like to start?
Yeah, certainly. It's funny. The heroes of my movies have always been the head lobbyist for big tobacco, or a pregnant teenage girl, or a guy who fires people for a living, or a woman who's trying to ruin someone else's marriage. I have a strange concept of what a hero is, and I've always seen the things that you just referred to as really locations. Smoking is a location for a movie about freedom of choice, and in this case, technology is a location for a movie about relationships and intimacy. And what I loved about the book was that it found a way into kind of the raw details of what it's like to be in love in 2014.
And Helen, what about you?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's exactly it. It's the relationships that you see so strongly in the book too, and I think that the technology aspect is wonderful, and I think that Jason and the team did an amazing job of showing that on screen and everything like that. But it's the relationships that always got it.
Okay, and Ansel, one for you just before we open it to the floor. Can you tell us what you responded to in the script? I mean, was it the themes? Was it the humour? Was it the characters? What was it excited you about the project?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. Sort of what they're saying is that it's a timeless story. Really, it's a story about that covers a lot of things, but it is set in this such a current way. I don't think a story's been told or a movie's been told in this with this current lens yet, where technology has changed the way that we interact with people, and it has changed the way that we have relationships, and it also has changed us. So I think it's interesting to tell a story about a bunch of characters, and you really see how technology has affected them. This movie has scared a lot of people, and I think when I read the script, it's it scares you, but what movie and art's supposed to do is make you talk about things, and I think this is the first movie that really opens up that conversation of how is technology changing things, and this really brings it to the extreme, but I think it does it, and it's really appropriate, and it really was time for a movie like this. Mm-hmm. So when I read the script, I was like, I have to be a part of this.
Jason, we have a couple of British connections to this. You're the composer, Bibio, but I do have to ask you the Emma Thompson question. I feel, why was her cut glass British accent the one you wanted? I mean, she sure has a way delivering that porno language.
Yeah, when Aaron Cresta Wilson, my co-writer, and I started adapting Chad's novel, we wanted to find a way to work in all of Chad's narration and description. And we imagined Voyager, this spacecraft which we launched in the 70s, looking back on Earth. And we thought, who would be the voice of Voyager, looking back on humanity, giving us this kind of cold but humorous look, as though observing animals in the wild. And we just started thinking about Emma's voice. It's how witty it is, how smart it is, and how she gets away with being naughty in a really intelligent way. And I don't know anyone else who can do that. So it went from being, wow, that's a good idea, to a desperation and hope that she would say yes. And I actually met her last year at Toronto Film Festival and suggested the film, and she read it. And she recorded it all in one fell swoop. She did a few changes along the way, but we met at a rock and roll studio in Hollywood, and she threw the whole thing down without ever watching a frame of the film.
Full marks for her. Okay, questions from the floor. There's a gentleman here with the microphone just to our left. Thank you.
Jason, it's not that long since you made Juno, and I wonder if in going back and making another film that focuses so heavily on teenagers and high school life, were you shocked at the rapid change in the landscape in terms of the way that teenagers are prepared to live their private lives in public?
100%. It's funny because, Juno was made in 2006 or 2007, and we had set it just a little bit earlier, just so we could get away from cell phones. And yeah, it's been 7 or 8 years, and we've gone from the hamburger phone to the iPhone. I mean, that's the transition from Juno to this film, and from touring high schools on Juno and seeing these buildings that were built in the 60s and 70s, and everything was made out of wood, and in trying to capture the feel of what a high school was then, to now, where we were touring a school in Texas where there were no lockers because there are no books. And there were device days and non-device days. And there were classrooms where kids had earbuds in the middle of class. And I asked an administrator, what are they listening to? And he said, I don't know, maybe music?
Really? Another question that here, just for the moment. You mentioned co-writing the screenplay with Erin Cressida Wilson, and why did you want to collaborate on this? I mean, she has written for the screen herself and for stage, and she's a professor of language and English, isn't she?
That I didn't know until this very moment. But Erin is the last thing from a prude. She wrote Secretary, and she wrote Fur, and she wrote Chloe, and I've known her for a while. We worked together on Chloe. And I ran into her at the Sundance Film Festival in the hallway of the Marriott. And I'd been, Helen and I had been talking about this book for a while, and how could this possibly be a movie? Every time we would talk about men, women, and children, I would think of the poster of Lolita, which used to say, how could they make a movie out of Lolita? And that's how I felt about this book. And I saw Erin Cressida, and I thought, I think if we did this together, we could accomplish it. And there was something about our mutual point of view, having a man and a woman write this together. There was a flirtation to writing this movie and adapting it. We had these index cards. Writers often use index cards to break down a screenplay. They were the funniest index cards of all time, because the descriptions of scenes would be like, Don masturbates to son's computer. Next index card.
And Helen, would you talk a little bit about the tone? I mean, I haven't read the book, and I assume a lot of people here haven't read the book, because I've heard that it was maybe darker in tone, and you needed to lighten it slightly.
Yeah. No, it's the book is much darker in a way that I found vaguely frightening. The children are younger, which scares me even more, and but I think that amidst all of that, I think that obviously Jason and Erin did an amazing job of bringing out the sort of humanity and the things that are universal, and that felt very relatable to it. I think that there is a lot that is even more shocking in the book, if you can imagine that.
We have a couple more questions on the floor. The lady just here, thank you.
Good afternoon, Yulia Savikovska from St. Petersburg. I was wondering, this film has a lot of texts which you have to read through the film, so I was wondering, you did it on purpose, like to see how the media interfere in the experience of watching the film as well, or you just couldn't avoid it because the script has to have all these text messages?
Right. Well, it's a complicated thing to make a movie about young people in 2014, because if you really examine our life, if you were to take a teenager today and try to make a movie about their day-to-day, 3/4 of their day would be a young person staring at a piece of glass, which is not very cinematic. And you have the need to see what someone, you need to be able to see a conversation that's happening between a person and a device rather than two human beings. So early on, Erin and I started talking about the ways that we could display what people are looking at on screen, and somehow make that part of the film plane. And I was looking at my computer desktop at one point, and I thought, well, what if the film plane was the desktop image, and every icon, every window, every tab was floating on top of that? Which was a fun idea, but it became a very tricky thing to accomplish, because we had to create negative space and create production design that would allow for all these things to take place, and then also relearn how to edit a movie in which you're not only tracking a person on screen, but track all the photos and text messages and everything else that appears, so that's interactive. The funny thing in watching the movie with audiences is that we're all so well trained at doing that now. We keep 10 apps open on our iPhone at once. If we're on our computer, we have music playing, we're searching two things, we're replying to an email, we're in the midst of an IM conversation, we're checking our Facebook, and we're so good at that now that watching a film where all these things take place is actually quite easy.
Okay, there's a question here, and then we'll come to the front, and then I think the microphone could just go up to the back there. Yeah, go ahead.
Ansel, you've so far you've been associated with two films that have had huge followings prior to the films coming out. And I just wondered if you felt there was a nice sense of freedom with this one, because people really aren't as invested in the characters before the film comes out at all. Was that a nice change, and what was that like actually doing a film in that way?
I'm trying to think of something witty to say. But no, I mean, to be honest, I sort of, every character I play, I don't really care if they have a big following behind and people expecting the character to be a certain way. I just, read the source material and bring them to life the best I can and listen to the director. In this case, I will say, I've already said it publicly, I think so far Jason is my favorite director I've ever worked with. I loved the work we did in this film. Jason really knows what he wants, and I like that, and he really crafted the character.
It's the sweetest way of saying bossy. I always love when an actor's like, he really knows what he wants.
Yeah, but that's great, and I'm glad, because I think that due to that, this character is really different than any other character I've played. Also, just because he is, but because Jason really made him who he is, and I had something to do with it, but he made a lot of the choices, and that made him really different.
The hardest thing about this character, I think, for Ansel, is that if Ansel even thinks about smiling, the luminance in the room goes up by 5 times. So trying to diminish that into a young man who's just got the weight of the world on his shoulders and is never smiling. Every once in a while we'd have to do, let's do a take, let's just get the smile out of the way. Let's just get that done, and now let's just bring you down with sandbags.
But it was good, because then when the smile finally happened after they kiss, it's really nice.
Yeah, that's really valuable.
It's like, oh, there's a smile, that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, the gentleman here.
Good afternoon. My question's for Jason Reitman. Hello. You like to adapt novels. What's the attraction for working that way, and where do you start when you look for your next story?
Oh, well, adapting a novel is fantastic, because you get to take credit for someone else's genius, and you have a writing partner who simply provides you with great words and doesn't argue with anything. I'm half kidding, but that's kind of true, right? Usually there's questions that are burning away at me, and like anybody, and I read a book, and I would think I have the same response that anyone does, that somehow this author has articulated something that I've been feeling and have not been able to put into words. And in the few cases where we've made movies, it's because the moment I start reading them, not only am I feeling that connection with the author, but I'm seeing a movie. It's just begins to play in my head. And that happened the first time I read Thank You for Smoking, happened the first time I read Up in the Air. I just start seeing the shots, I see Clooney in the airport. And in this one, there was something fun about how could we possibly portray this movie on screen. There's so many personal, private moments. And that's what we're living in the moment of, right? We're living in the moment of exposed private moments, because we are being more... I just heard a TED Talk recently that said, our search engines know more about us than our closest loved ones and our family. And I think that's true. So we're in the midst of exposing our secrets and having these interesting private moments, and the book somehow captured what it was like to be with teenagers, male, female, adults, married, divorced, what those private moments were like. and what it was like to be in between their fingertips and their screens.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, gentleman at the back, and then if the mic could go to this gentleman in the blue shirt. Go ahead.
Hi guys, congratulations on the film, by the way. Absolutely loved it. My question to Ansel, obviously in the young adult franchise. Oh,
I think you're getting feedback on your mic.
and take two.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the film. Ansel, my question to you is, in the young adult franchises you've been involved with, like Divergent and Fault, you've been playing young people who are facing extraordinary life or death situations, and this is perhaps one of the first films where you're playing a young person just facing the challenges of ordinary life. And I guess I'm curious, in your opinion, particularly having made this film now, what do you see as the biggest challenges and dangers facing young people? And Jason, just following up on your last point about privacy, how apropos do you feel the current focus on our digital and sexual privacy is at the moment for the release of this film?
Well, I think that young people have always faced a lot of challenges. I don't think personally that technology is making young people's lives more dangerous or difficult or hard. I mean, I remember when I was 15, I didn't have like that much technology. Maybe I just got my first iPhone, but like it wasn't a big deal yet. Yeah, when I was 15, I had the same thing as Tim did, which was I looked at the stars and said, "We're so small, we don't matter." I think a lot of young people go through that, and I think young people have been going through that forever. I don't think that technology has made people worry about, oh, do we matter, do we not matter? And I think that's Tim's biggest struggle. Whether or not it's an MMORPG, the role-playing game he plays, or some other escape that a kid might have had 20 years ago. I think kids are still kids. That's the beautiful thing about this movie. It's still very timeless. It's just technology is how it's set. But I personally, I'm not that scared by it. I think the world is always changing. And this is just a change, and obviously, people are always scared of changes. But in terms of what you're saying, this character, he's not going through anything like really life or death. I don't know. I think for him, the stakes are pretty high. He still tries to kill himself. So, whether or not it is like, you're living in a world where the world's going to end, in Divergent or in Fault in Our Stars, he's, dying of cancer. In this one, he's still 15 years old, and that's a really, really hard time of life too. So it is also life or death, as far as I'm concerned, when I'm playing that role. I'm not comparing it to like, oh yeah, this guy has less at stake because he's not dying of cancer like my last character. He has just as much at stake, just in terms of, oh, this girl doesn't like me anymore, or my video game account got deleted. It's still the end of the world.
This is a complicated moment that I don't think anyone can quite understand. I feel like we're the Cro-Magnons at the beginning of 2001, and that giant black slab shows up, and we touch the slab, and we are instantaneously given knowledge, and that Cro-Magnon grabs the tibia bone and kills the other Cro-Magnon for the watering hole. I think that's the stage where we're at as far as the internet goes, and we're not going to be able to fully understand this moment for another 50 years, and we'll look back and realize we were wandering in the dark trying to figure out issues of privacy and issues of what we share and who are the characters that we create for ourselves online.
Okay, thank you. There's a gentleman here and then a question in the front row.
Good morning, I'm Alessandro De Simone from Italy, La Rivista del Cinematografo. But two short questions from Mr. Reitman. The first one is, thinking about what Ansel just said, actually teenagers are not different from John Hughes movies of the 80s, and I wonder if you appreciated that movies when you were younger. And the second question is about Adam Sandler. I really loved the way you use this, for me, great actor in your movie. And I wanted to know how he is working with him.
Certainly. You can't be anywhere close to my age and not love John Hughes. He's the guy who took young people seriously. And he was the first guy who did that. He made movies about young people that took their human drama and made it real. What you said is exactly right. I think to be 15 is to feel as though you have cancer, is to feel as though you are dying and the weight of the world is on your shoulders. Certainly we tried to emulate that on Juno, and certainly we tried to emulate that on this film. Things have not changed. It's just the landscape has. But the teenagers are the same. Adam Sandler and I met a few years ago, and in him I found an actor and a storyteller who was much closer to my heart than I would have initially presumed. When we started talking about stories we wanted to tell, they were the same stories, and we began working on a few different things. And when this movie came up, we had a movie that started with a man trying to log on to a pornography site, but his computer had too much spam, so he goes into his teenage son's bedroom and uses his son's computer instead. And it ends with a husband and wife having a very complicated conversation about whether or not they should be completely honest with each other. I needed an actor who was not only great, but was accessible. And I couldn't think of a more perfect person than Sandler to do it. And we talked for a while about it. He had a lot of questions about how he was going to portray it and what the film meant and what the last scene meant. But the more we talked, the more I knew in my heart, this is the perfect guy for it. And it was a great moment for us when he said yes, and I can't think of a better way for the film to open and close than with him. And he was absolutely lovely on set. I've never had an actor do this. Every day, I'm not even sure if I told you about this, if he wasn't shooting, he would text me and ask how everyone else was doing. How's Ansel doing? How's Rosemary doing? Which scene are you doing today? What are they serving for lunch today? How's the cut going? He would check in about everything.
He still texts me all the time.
Yeah.
It's like so nice. I'm like, that's Adam Sandler texting me. I was like, by the way, I just watched Waterboy last night.
How's my boy? Yeah. No, he was fantastic.
Okay, we've a question in the front row here.
Hello, Karen Spencer, Swedish Radio. I just want to ask, because it's a lot of sensitive subject matter in the film and young actors, and I'm wondering how you went about to create a vibe where they would be comfortable enough to give these performances. And then I want to ask Ansel how you describe that vibe.
I wish I could sit here and say that I did a lot, but I didn't. What was unbelievable is we had these 8 young actors who ranged in age from like 15 to 22 years old. And considering the amount of tricky material they were taking on, and each one was dealing with something difficult with their character, they came so mature, so confident, and created a friendship within each other that made the set a very exciting place to be. We shot the teenagers in December, and we shot the adults in January. December was about young love, and January was about marriages falling apart. It made for a very interesting pre-Christmas and post-Christmas shoot.
Yeah, I remember talking to Jason before we started a lot about Tim. And then I hung out with all the teenagers, and I had such a good time, and we were all so close that I realized that I wasn't really... I had this plan when I got there of like being secluded and letting myself get really depressed and down, and I totally forgot to do that. So I was like in a great mood, having a fun time in Texas, and I was playing World of Warcraft by myself at my house in New York, and like getting really depressed and addicted. And then when I got there, then Will Peltz started playing with me. And then it became like a 2-person thing, and it was really fun, which is not what it was supposed to be. So then the first day of shooting, I like decided that I needed to really like flip a switch and even maybe just like stay in character the whole day and get really down. So I did that the first day, and then after that I slowly opened up again. But I needed to like push myself down, and after that, yeah, Jason just pretty much like I think. We after talking, you figure out who the character is, But then Jason gave really specific direction. And it's easy to take direction from a guy who's made a lot of really good movies. Because then you can trust him and know that, like, yeah, he probably has a good point. Or, like, the direction, no, it's like the direction he's giving is probably going to be pretty good. So it's easy to take everything he says. And he would often just say, do less. Just don't do anything. Like, just breathe and say the lines, and you know who the guy is. You don't have to do too much. Because I come from theater where you have to, play to an audience. And he really didn't want me to do that. And I'm really glad I took all his directions, because, like I said, I think this performance is different for me, and I love that it's different. And I have to thank Jason for that.
It was a great moment, I remember, and I remember you were in it. It was one of the first days when we were in the cafeteria, and we were throwing around a football, and I remember you were just in it, and I went to throw you a football, and you're like, no, I don't do that, because your character wasn't playing football anymore. And then and everyone else is playing football, and finally you're like, I saw your hands up, go for a throw, and I'm like, yeah, threw you the football. And we all played football the entire show. It was a loose set, but it was a loose set with an incredible amount of trust, which is what you need if characters are going to be dealing with sexuality in the way that they are.
There'll be another question from the floor, the lady beside you. But Helen, could I just ask you about the reaction that you've had from people, friends and family perhaps, who've seen the film and who are maybe, you've scared the bejesus out of them. or they've said, actually, I'm not doing such a bad job after all. And young people as well.
Yeah, I mean, all of my friends who have kids have emailed or called to say, "What did you do?" They're all sort of like, oh, "Okay." I think that there's been a lot of it is scary in that way. But I think that the thing that's been the most fulfilling is the people who really. And there have been a lot of comments about just how realistic it is and how much of an accurate portrayal of this moment it can be. And I think that it's been really exciting to see people respond in that way, and to also just respond to the performances and respond to the filmmaking sort of beyond the sort of bigger internet technology aspect of it, but just sort of there's been a lot of really lovely response to what an incredible job all of our actors did, because I think it's a phenomenal ensemble cast in a way that I think that we got so lucky with these guys, and that's been really fun.
Okay. And Jason, you told me after Thank You for Smoking that you would always cast J.K. Simmons in your films if you could, and you've been absolutely true to your word, even with just a voiceover, I think, in Young Adult as well. What makes him your go-to guy?
It's funny. I mean, I suppose every director has that one actor who somehow speaks their voice. And apparently my voice is a guy in his... You all right there, buddy?
Yeah, I choked on water.
Is a guy in his mid-50s who can terrify people the way he does in Whiplash. I don't know what it is, but there's a natural bond that started on that movie. And I can't imagine making movies without him, and I'm envious actually of what an amazing job that Damien did with him on Whiplash. I remember Paul Thomas Anderson once said about Fargo, I wanted to be the guy that directed Bill Macy to that performance. And I look at J.K. in Whiplash, and I go, I want to be the guy who directed J.K. Simmons to that performance.
And there's a final question from the front row here. Thank you.
Hi, Eva from Czech Republic. I wonder, Ansel, you said that reading the script was scary. So I wonder how much effect the film had on you personally, and how much the use of internet changed. Like if you changed your internet habits, for example. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the film definitely leaves you not wanting to look at your phone at the end of the film. And if you look at the person next to you and they're on their phone, you should just hit them on the top of the head and be like, "Didn't you learn anything from that?" But it's not that. This film doesn't say "Oh, put your phone away. Technology's bad" and all this stuff. I think it's just one of the things it says is human connection is what's important here. That's the reason why we got these smartphones. It's so that we can connect. And I know it's cheesy, whatever, and everyone's saying it, but it's true. Everyone is sort of disconnecting now. Everyone got these smartphones to connect, and everyone's disconnecting. So personally, I've started to use it less. I think everyone will start to use it less for a little, as long as it's cool. Because now that like art and like this movie, and there's like a bunch of like, you know, social campaigns saying like, look up and don't use your phone all the time. Now it's going to be popular culture not to use your phone, so that's good. People are going to get off a little bit, and then there's going to be something new that comes out that's really cool again, and then people are going to be totally addicted to that. That's the way the world works.
And Helen and Jason, have you moderated your use of technology since the movie?
Oh, the day we stopped shooting, I actually drove back from Austin to LA and turned off my phone for 5 straight days, which was the hardest thing I have ever done. But it was a fun experiment, and I don't know if it was directly in response to this. It was also directly in response to a very busy fall, but it was interesting, and it was interesting to see in the context of all of this sort of how that affects how it sort of affected me and my head, and also how it affected everyone else that I was used to having me constantly available at every moment. So it was a fun little experiment that I probably won't try again.
You, Jason?
I'm envious of that experiment. I have become more conscientious of it, and I certainly think a lot about it when it comes to my daughter. I think I'm more conscientious of when I'm on my phone in front of my daughter than anything else. And there's something about it. For whatever reason, there's something in the back of my head. It's funny. I remember when I made Thank You for Smoking. There was a woman I knew who was in politics, and I was so excited to be making a libertarian movie. And she said, "I wonder what will change when you become a father." And I said, "I will never change." And there's something about when I'm on my phone in front of my daughter that makes me want to put my phone in my pocket.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, will you thank our guests this afternoon? Thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.